All right, sweetheart. Who's this man to you?
He's my dad.
Is he telling you to say that?
No. Officer.
Sir, I'm gonna need proof she's your daughter. Birth certificate, custody papers, something official. If you can't show me, you're going in cuffs.
Officer Ryan Kelcher, a 9-year veteran of the Harlow Creek Police Department, walked into Miller's Diner on a Saturday morning, saw a black man sitting in a booth with a white 5-year-old girl, and made a decision about what he was seeing before he took another step. He approached Dominic Wells without a single piece of evidence and without any observable sign of distress from the child. Just a black man, a white girl, and an assumption. He accused Dominic of abducting his own daughter and proceeded to arrest him without cause. What Officer Ryan Kelcher didn't know was that the man he was dragging out of that booth in handcuffs was a sitting magistrate judge with 12 years on the bench, and that his decision to treat a black father like a criminal on his daughter's 5th birthday would cost him his badge, his career, and the city of name $1.1 million. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from. And if you believe a black father adopting and raising a white child should never be treated as something suspicious, like this video and subscribe. Miller's Diner on a Saturday morning sounds exactly the way you'd want it to. Plates clattering, coffee being poured, the low hum of conversations overlapping each other across vinyl booths, and in the window booth. The one by the left corner, the one that had quietly become his booth over 3 years of Saturday mornings. Sat Dominic Wells, 53 years old, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, watching his 5-year-old daughter Zoe try to balance a spoonful of whipped cream on her nose without dropping it. He was letting her win. Sarah, their regular waitress, had already brought his black coffee without him asking. She'd also slipped a small paper birthday crown onto Zoe's head the moment they walked in because she knew. Same as she knew their order. Same as she knew the booth. Same as she knew the way Dominic always let Zoe order first and then looked up at Sarah with that quiet half-smile that said whatever she wants today. Dominic Wells had spent 12 years as a magistrate judge in this county. 12 years of watching people walk into his courtroom carrying the full weight of their circumstances and learning, case by case, year by year, how to read a room before it read itself to him. He was patient in the way that only men who have sat in judgment of others learn to be patient, measured, unhurried, a man who never said more than what the moment required. But none of that is what this Saturday morning was about. This Saturday morning was about Zoe turning 5. 3 years earlier, Dominic's world had rearranged itself in the span of a single phone call. His closest friend, Thomas Calloway, a man he had known for 30 years, a man who was less a friend and more a brother in every way that word actually means, had been in a car accident. His wife died at the scene. Thomas was pulled from the wreckage and rushed into surgery, and by the time Dominic got to the hospital, the doctors were already speaking in the careful, measured language that means there is very little time left. Thomas lasted 4 hours. In those 4 hours, he asked for one thing. Not arrangements, not paperwork. Just Dominic's hand and one request. His daughter Zoe was 2 years old. She was with a neighbor, and Thomas Calloway looked at the closest person he had in this world and said he could not let her go to strangers. He could not let her grow up without someone who already loved her. Dominic said yes before Thomas finished the sentence. 18 months of fostering. Then the adoption finalized. Then the morning Dominic sat in this exact booth and told Sarah, and Sarah cried into her apron, and Zoe ate an entire plate of pancakes with whipped cream and had no idea what any of it meant yet. Only that her daddy was smiling, and that was enough. Now she was 5. Whipped cream on her nose, birthday crown slightly tilted, reaching across the table to steal a piece of bacon off Dominic's plate like she thought he wouldn't notice. He noticed. He let her take it anyway. That was the scene Officer Ryan Kelcher walked into. He came in response to a call. A vague, shapeless complaint from a customer who told dispatch something didn't look right at Miller's Diner. No crime described, no distress described. Nothing specific enough to build a single sentence around, just a feeling. Kelcher took the call, drove over, walked through the door, and scanned the room. His eyes found the window booth. He didn't stop at the host stand, didn't speak to the manager, didn't ask a single staff member what the supposed disturbance was. He walked directly to Dominic's booth and stopped at the edge of the table, standing over them both. "Excuse me, sir. I need to ask you some questions about this child." Dominic set down his coffee, looked up. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" Kelcher didn't answer him. He turned to Zoe instead. "Sweetheart, what's your name?" Zoe looked at her dad, then back at the officer. Zoe. Do you know this man, Zoe? That's my daddy. Kelcher. Is he really your daddy, or is that what he told you to say? Zoe turned to Dominic, brow furrowed, the way 5-year-olds furrow their brows when the world stops making sense. Daddy, what's wrong? Dominic's hand moved across the table toward hers. Everything's fine, Peanut. Keep eating. Then he looked back at Kelcher. Still calm, still measured. But something behind his eyes had shifted. The particular stillness of a man who has just understood exactly what kind of situation he is in. Officer, she is my legally adopted daughter. My name is Dominic Wells. I'm happy to show you my identification. Kelcher, I'm going to need to see that, and I need you to explain your relationship to this child. Dominic produced his driver's license without breaking eye contact and placed it on the table. Kelcher picked it up, examined it. This doesn't show she's your daughter. My driver's license shows my name and my address. Her last name is also Wells. We live at the same address. I have her adoption documents on my phone if you need to see them. How long have you had the child? Something moved across Dominic's face. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter than anger. How long have I had my daughter? 3 years since the adoption was finalized. And before that? I fostered her for 18 months, officer. On what basis are you questioning me? Kelcher didn't answer. He looked at Zoe again, then back at Dominic. Then he reached for his radio. I have a possible 207A at Miller's Diner. Need backup. Possible abduction situation. Male suspect on scene with minor female. The word abduction landed in the diner like something physical. Customers stopped eating. Someone gasped. Sarah, standing near the kitchen entrance, covered her mouth with both hands. Dominic Wells sat completely still. He looked at Zoe. She was looking back at him, her hand reaching across the table to find his, not crying. But her eyes were wide and searching, sensing that something was wrong and the way children sense things before they can name them. And she held onto his hand and didn't let go. He covered her hand with his. Everything is fine, Peanut. Then he looked at Kelcher, and his voice dropped to something so quiet and so precise it cut through every sound in that diner. You just called a child abduction code on me in front of my daughter. Outside, the backup sirens were already getting closer, and every phone in Miller's Diner was recording. Backup arrived fast. 2 officers pushed through the diner door within 90 seconds of Kelcher's radio call, and before either of them had a chance to look around and assess what they were walking into, Kelcher was already at the door meeting them, already talking, already building his version of events. Unidentified male, white female minor, refusing to cooperate, refusing to step outside, possibly fraudulent documentation. By the time the 2 officers looked across the diner at Dominic Wells, they were already seeing him through Kelcher's eyes. What they actually saw was a 53-year-old man sitting calmly in a booth, his daughter's small hand held in both of his, a half-eaten plate of birthday pancakes on the table between them. No raised voice, no aggression, no distress from the child beyond the wide, uncertain eyes of a little girl who didn't understand why strangers kept interrupting her birthday breakfast. As the officers approached, Dominic spoke first. He didn't wait to be addressed. My name is Dominic Wells. This is my daughter Zoe Wells. I have already provided identification to Officer Kelcher. I have offered to show her adoption documents. There is no abduction. There is no disturbance. There never was. One of the backup officers looked at the adoption document Dominic had pulled up on his phone, read it carefully, and then looked over at Kelcher with an expression that asked a question Kelcher didn't want to answer. The other officer stayed quiet and kept his eyes on Dominic. Kelcher didn't back down. He told the backup officers that Dominic had been obstructive from the moment he arrived, that he had refused direct orders, that his behavior had been suspicious throughout. Dominic responded to each point the same way. Quietly, specifically, and without raising his voice once. He had answered every question. He had provided identification. He had offered documentation. He had declined to leave his 5-year-old daughter alone at a table, and declining that was not obstruction under any statute Kelcher could name. Sarah had heard enough. She walked over from the kitchen entrance and told the officers directly that Dominic and Zoe came to this diner every single Saturday, that she had been their waitress for 3 years, that she had watched the adoption happen in real time, and that Dominic Wells had done absolutely nothing wrong from the moment he walked through the door, a customer from the next booth. A man who said he had seen them there a dozen times. backed her up without being asked. A woman 2 tables over who had been recording since Kelcher first approached the booth told the officers she had the entire interaction on video and that it showed exactly what it looked like. A black man being harassed for sitting with his white daughter. None of it slowed Kelcher down. He told Dominic to stand up. Dominic asked him to state the legal basis for the arrest. Kelcher said obstruction and failure to comply with a lawful order. Dominic told him calmly and clearly that no lawful order had been given, that a request to leave his daughter was not a lawful order, and that he had violated no law by declining it. Kelcher told him again to stand up, and when Dominic didn't move, Kelcher reached into the booth, grabbed him by the arm, and pulled. Zoe didn't scream. She made a sound that was smaller than a scream, and worse. A sharp, frightened intake of breath, and her eyes filled with tears as she reached across the table for her father's hand and found it being pulled away from her. She didn't cry, but her chin trembled and her eyes stayed locked on Dominic, the way a child's eyes lock on the one person they trust when the world stops making sense. Dominic looked back at her for exactly 1 second. "It's okay, Peanut. Stay there." Then he looked at Kelcher, and every person in that diner heard what he said next. "My name is Dominic Wells. I am a magistrate judge in this county. I have served on the bench for 12 years. You are arresting me without probable cause, and every person in this room is a witness." Kelcher put him in handcuffs anyway. The sergeant arrived 11 minutes after Kelcher called it in. Sergeant Paul Donovan, 22 years on the force, walked through the door of Miller's Diner expecting a routine situation that had gotten slightly out of hand. What he walked into was 30 customers sitting in dead silence, 12 phones still recording, a 5-year-old girl with a birthday crown on her head crying quietly into a waitress's shoulder, and a handcuffed man sitting at a booth with the stillness of someone who had already decided exactly what was going to happen next. Donovan scanned the room. His eyes landed on Dominic, then on the handcuffs, then on Zoe. He crossed the diner without speaking to Kelcher first. "Sir, can you tell me what happened here?" Dominic looked up at him. "Your officer responded to a call with no described crime, approached me and my daughter without cause, ignored my identification, ignored my documentation, ignored 3 years of staff witness testimony, called the child abduction code on a legally adopted child sitting with her legal father, and arrested me for asking him to justify it. That is what happened here." Donovan turned to Kelcher. "What do you have?" Kelcher started talking. The call, the refusal to cooperate, the suspicious behavior, the documentation that couldn't be verified. Donovan listened. Then he turned back to Dominic and asked one question. "What's your full name?" "Dominic Wells." Donovan went still for just a moment. He pulled out his phone, typed something, and looked at the screen. What came up was the county court website. And on it, clear as anything, was a photograph of the man sitting handcuffed in front of him. Magistrate Judge Dominic Wells. 12 years on the bench, County Circuit Court. Donovan looked at the screen for a long moment. Then he looked at Kelcher. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He walked Kelcher to the far end of the diner, away from the customers, and spoke to him in a low voice that carried more weight than shouting ever could. Kelcher's face went through several expressions in quick succession. Defense, confusion, and then something that looked like the slow, sickening realization of a man watching the ground open up beneath him. Donovan came back. He crouched down so he was at eye level with Dominic and spoke quietly. "Judge Wells, I'm removing the handcuffs right now, and I'm deeply sorry for what happened here today." He uncuffed him personally. Dominic stood, straightened his sweater, and walked directly to Zoe. He took her from Sarah's arms and held her, and she buried her face in his neck and held onto him with both hands. He rubbed her back and said nothing for a moment, just held his daughter in the middle of the diner while 30 people watched in complete silence. Then he turned around. "I want every badge number in this room documented. I want Sergeant Donovan's report filed before end of day, and I want it noted that I identified myself as a magistrate judge before the handcuffs went on." He looked at Kelcher, who was standing near the door, not moving, not speaking. "You heard me tell you who I was. You heard my daughter tell you who I was. You heard the staff tell you who I was. And you put me in handcuffs anyway, in front of my daughter, on her birthday." The diner was so quiet you could hear the coffee machine running behind the counter. "My title should not have been what protected me today. My rights as a human being should have been enough. But you couldn't see my rights. You could only see my skin." He picked up Zoe's birthday crown from the table, placed it back on her head, and looked at Donovan. "You'll be hearing from my attorney." He walked out. The video was everywhere before the end of that Saturday. 12 different angles, 12 different phones, all capturing the same thing. A black man in handcuffs. A 5-year-old girl with a birthday crown reaching for her father, and an officer who had been told exactly who he was dealing with and didn't care. By Sunday morning, it had 6 million views. By Monday, it had tripled. Every major news outlet was running the story, and the image they all used was the same one. Zoe's hand reaching across the table for Dominic's as the cuffs went on. The caption wrote itself. The city's police department released a statement Monday afternoon calling the incident deeply concerning and promising a full internal investigation. It was the kind of statement that uses a lot of words to say very little, but the investigation that followed was not something they could control, and what it uncovered made the original incident look like the end of a very long story, rather than the beginning. Kelcher's personnel file showed 6 prior welfare checks on black men with white children over 9 years, all 6 cleared, all 6 documented, none of them ever investigated as a pattern. The department had the information sitting in a file and had looked at it and done nothing. And now that file was being read by lawyers, journalists, and a federal civil rights investigator who had seen the video and opened an inquiry without being asked. Kelcher was suspended without pay within 48 hours, terminated within 3 weeks. The official finding was that he had violated department policy on use of force, made false statements in his incident report. He had described Dominic as aggressive and uncooperative, which the video disproved in the first 30 seconds, and had demonstrated a clear pattern of racially discriminatory conduct. He was 34 years old with 9 years on the force and no path back into law enforcement. The department that had ignored 6 prior complaints and handed him the tools to do this did not offer him a defense. Dominic's attorneys filed the federal civil rights lawsuit 2 weeks after the incident. The charges covered unlawful detention, false arrest, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, racial discrimination, and emotional distress inflicted on a minor child. The city's legal team reviewed the evidence. 12 videos, 30 witness statements, a personnel file full of red flags, and an incident report that contradicted every piece of recorded footage, and made the calculation that no jury in the country was going to side with them. They settled for the full $1.1 million within 90 days. Dominic donated a significant portion of the settlement to 2 organizations, one that provides legal support to victims of racial profiling, and one that funds therapy for children who have experienced trauma related to police encounters. The rest went into a college fund for Zoe. He returned to the bench and said very little publicly after his one statement outside the courthouse on settlement day. He said that he hoped the reforms the city agreed to, mandatory bias training, new protocols for welfare checks, an independent review board for discrimination complaints, would mean something real for the next person. He said that the next person probably wouldn't be a judge. He said that was exactly the point. Zoe turned 6 the following year. Dominic took her to Miller's Diner. Same booth, same birthday crown, same extra whipped cream on the pancakes. Sarah had saved their booth. The diner put a small sign on the table that just said reserved. Wells family, it's still there. Some people never went back to the place where something like that happened to them. Dominic went back because he refused to let Ryan Kelcher take that too. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to understand that black fathers exist, that black love is real, and that dignity should never depend on a title. What changes would you demand from your city's police department? Drop them in the comments. And if you believe every father deserves to celebrate his daughter's birthday in peace, subscribe. We will keep telling these stories until the system has no choice but to listen. Asterisk.